What's going on, everyone? Scott here. Welcome back to the channel. So Survivor Season 48 Episode 9 is here, getting down to the nitty-gritty of this season. Chrissy went home last week. The strong 5 or newly strong 6 seemingly running the game at this point, and everyone else seems like they're running out of options to make moves. At least that's the view from the outside coming into this episode. But before we do jump into the recap for this episode, if you could, just hit that like and subscribe button down there. We'll have more Survivor content on the channel, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. So let's just jump right in. Back at camp, Shaheen says that he's good and that Chrissy went home because she tried to take an early jab at me, even though she was taking jabs at, the muscles and everyone, all the strong people, quote unquote, of, this season. And he doesn't know how that involved him and why he got a vote there from Chrissy on the way out. But David tells Camilla that he threw his name out there because was afraid that Chrissy was going to play the shot in the dark. But Camilla doesn't think David knows that he's on Survivor and not the Olympic qualifiers, and obviously doesn't believe him because Kyle has told Camilla the information of David wanting to get Camilla out just in general, not because of a shot in the dark worry. But David says that Kyle's been scaring him lately and questions why he was so hesitant to vote out Camilla. Day 16 and the strong 6 watch the sunrise and are excited that they can just run the game at this point. They float Mitch's name out there, Camilla's name out there, and the consensus is to get Camilla out. Obviously, that was kind of the discussion last time. It was either Camilla or it was Chrissy. And, they were able to switch it to keep Camilla in the game and get Chrissy out a kind of last second there. But something has to give here with Camilla being Kyle's number 1. He's been playing the middle pretty well, as he says, but as he says, things are starting to fall apart. He talks to Shaheen saying that, David and Mary are a strong duo and that they don't trust himself, Kyle, and Shaheen. They talk about going after Mary, getting out, David's new number 1 in this game, and Mary and David are hard at work convincing Eva that Shaheen and Kyle are working together with Camilla, and even she's like, they're being extremely paranoid, and she doesn't think anyone will swap, at this point. And Kyle and David talk about why yesterday was a rough day. David doesn't think it was needed to be a rough day, and, Kyle says, wasn't trying to add tension here, and David's just like, this should have been easy, but, kind of basically saying, like, this was made harder than it should have been. But David's paranoia is just kind of keeping on rolling here. And then at night, it's time for Eva to take advantage of the clue that she found at the taco reward to go and get her advantage. She starts to sneak out of camp and Shaheen sees her. He's putting two and two together here, and he wakes up Joe and whispers that Eva's gone. Wait for her to come back. And Joe obviously trusts Eva, though, so he's not too concerned. She goes on the beach, sees the light. She gets an extra vote at the table just for finding it and going there, and obviously finding the clue, at the reward. But she can keep it and go back to camp, or risk it and earn something more powerful. You can risk it to try to get a safety without power, or lose your, extra vote. So go back to camp with nothing. So a 50-50 shot here. She risks it and gets the safety without power. But wait, there's more. She has another decision to make. Can risk it to get 1 immunity idol. Of the 3 scrolls, 1 immunity idol is in there. The other 2 are you get nothing. So you lose, your safety without power. You lose the extra vote you could have had, and you go back with nothing. Doesn't go for it, and that's smart in my opinion. Obviously she has another idol already in this game that everyone knows about, but obviously having a secret one, could be an advantage, but especially where she's at in the game right now, I think just that safety without power is, good enough to where she has that. She has the hidden immunity idol. At this point, there's 9 people left in the game. If she makes it through this week, there's 8 people left in the game. You only got, like 3 more tribals that you can use these advantages at. So I think that's smart. You got 2 idol, safe plays, I guess, kind of, if you will, because safety without power basically kind of acts like an idol. If you want to use that idol for someone else or just to save yourself, then you want to use safety without power, get out. You could screw your alliance, but you are safe for sure 2 more tribal councils with just those 2 in your possession. So smart move there from Eva, in my opinion. In the morning, Eva tells Kyle, Joe, and Shaheen about her advantage trip last night. Shaheen solidifies that he trusts Eva with her telling them, about her advantage. Kyle debriefs Camilla on everything, and David's still all in on going on Shaheen and Kyle, and that they're together with Camilla. Joe trusts Kyle and Shaheen, though. David says to Joe that he went back on his word, and he's like, whoa, I'm not capable of doing that. I didn't go back on my word. We were talking about getting Camilla out. That's what we were talking as a group, and as a group, we decided to go with Chrissy instead, and he keeps on insisting that Joe went back on his word. Kind of just, he knows that's the type of game that Joe is playing, so kind of trying to entice him, like, hey, you went back on your word. That's not the type of honorable game you're playing. And Joe is insulted, and definitely not the way to go if you're trying to get your stay on Joe's good graces, in my opinion. But Joe doesn't know if he can trust David now. Then a cool moment, Star doesn't know how to swim. Mitch shows her some tips, and she gets out there, starts to swim, and she's doing it. And she says that she will sign up for those swim classes. And Kyle feels the war brewing with the little battles going on around, the tribe at this point. And Kyle tells Joe, opening up, about why yesterday triggered him a little bit. And says that as a teen, tells him about some of the issues that he had. And he talks about being in jail and convincing the judge to let him leave and take a test. And then working on schoolwork while in jail on the computer, and his fiance bringing him books. Now that he is an attorney, obviously he's keeping that a secret, as you should, as an attorney on Survivor, because lawyers, attorneys, they do fairly well on Survivor. So smart of him to keep that a secret. But obviously, it was cool to see him open up like that. Kyle has been one of my favorite throughout this season. So cool that he kind of gets his moment here to open up and, thank him that he does, is comfortable enough to open up in that situation to Joe and to everyone, watching as well. But Joe tells Kyle about David trying to manipulate him about going back on his word. And he wants to see where Eva's head is at, though. And Joe knows that Eva trusts David and Mary. Eva says that she's trying to just keep everything together. Like, she understands the paranoia, but, sees a path to this, to secure this final 6, and just wants to get there. She believes that she's in the exact middle. And, that seems about right in terms of that alliance, because it's kind of her and Joe, David and Mary, and then Kyle and Shaheen are in the middle. And, she kind of can, swing this thing either way. Immunity challenge time, going to be a reward challenge as well, with ham and cheese wraps, crackers and dip, chocolate-covered strawberries, and a spot in the final 8 on the line. It comes down to Joe, Kyle, and David, and then turns into a showdown between Joe and David. David tells Joe, in the showdown, don't worry, if I win, I'm still picking you for the food reward. And David slips off the podium, and Joe wins immunity and reward, and here's your opportunity to take out the big gun. And they kind of seem to focus on how upset David was about, losing that immunity challenge. And David says that I should have won that, not taking anything away from Joe, but I had a lot left in the tank. Joe picks Mitch, who hasn't had a reward yet, a human-to-human move, as he says, and then chooses Shaheen and Eva to go on the reward as well. Interesting, kind of huge reward at this point with 9 people left. 4 people going on a reward, 5 people going back to camp. And then back at camp, David is still really upset he lost the challenge. Mary consoles him for a long while, and this just confirms, as Kyle says, how tight they are and that they need to split them up. David and Mary talk about throwing votes on Mitch again. They think that Shaheen and Kyle basically will play an idol for Camilla, and he wants to potentially work with Star, so that just leaves Mitch as a name to throw out there. And Star walks up to David and Mary and says, would you be willing to vote Shaheen? They say they can't tonight because they feel like they got something going on, that they'll play an idol for Camilla. Mitch pitches David going home with the reward, and Shaheen gets excited, but doesn't want to push too hard. And even though, as he said, he's been planting these seeds throughout the last, 5 days or so, and they show a nice compilation of him, kind of mentioning stuff about David and, as he says, planting those seeds. So other people can see it for themselves. And, he uses the babysitting word, and he references Boston Rob on his Redemption Island season, the buddy system or babysitting, whatever you want to call it. But just kind of planting those seeds to allow everyone to see it for themselves over a couple days before you potentially make a big move on a big player in this game. And welcome to the party, David. Let's party, as Shaheen says. David tells Eva that he's thinking that Shaheen and Kyle are going to flip and that they should go after Mitch tonight. Eva sees the paranoia and doesn't like them coming after her friends. Kyle says that he's considering writing down David to Eva. Delicate balance, getting 2 loyal people to turn on their alliance in terms of Eva and Joe. Shaheen is most comfortable with writing David down at this point as well. Eva wants to talk with Joe to get on the same page. Eva trusts that Mary and David are with her, but doesn't know if they're with her people, as she says. And Joe says he's with her regardless. Mitch or David seems to be the showdown tonight at Tribal Council. At Tribal Council, things are starting to feel like they're getting tighter now. Eva is solid, locked in with what she wants to do. Mary with a good line in, what if you strike first when the other person wasn't going to ever strike? Camilla says, I think David should keep the jury in mind. He may be happy with the game that he's playing, but you got to think about the people that he's putting over there on the jury, or that you're putting over there on the jury in general. And David knocks on wood, as Joe says, basically playing this trusting game could bite you. Knocks on wood. Will it work? Well, let's see. We get the votes, and it does not work. David goes home. A big move here. Don't tell Joe that he went back on his word, I think, is the main lesson here. And all the paranoia, I think, that David was causing with Mary as well, definitely obviously led to this. Plus the opportunity to get out a big threat like David in this game. You can't, at the end of the day, it's Survivor. Like, as much as a loyal game you want to play, you see a big threat like that, even though it seemed like he could be a good person to take to the end, because the people that he's helping put on the jury, and it seems like he might have been rubbing people kind of the wrong way, especially by the way, Camilla is saying that, you should be mindful of who you're putting on the jury. Maybe he wouldn't have been a bad person to take to the end because people wouldn't have liked the way he played. But at the end of the day, let's play the game now. We're kind of, done with this, strong 5, strong 6, whatever it is. I still think that core kind of like Eva, Joe will still be together. But now I think you could start to see, Kyle and Camilla, kind of come to light a little bit more now that we're kind of getting down to this final 8 here. Maybe they will be louder in terms of making more moves publicly together. But next week, Camilla, Star, and Mary possibly working together. Mitch wanting to make a move, Camilla wanting to get out Joe, Star saying all the big people are going to get ate by the piranhas. And then when we see the votes, it looks like David, Mary, and Star voted for Mitch. Everyone else voted for David. So anyway, that'll do for this one. Another exciting episode of Survivor. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty of it, as we said. The final 8, I imagine probably 2 more episodes before the finale. Usually, the finale usually has final 6, maybe final 5. It depends. Some years it differs. Some years they have even more. So, but I imagine we're down to the last, 3-ish, 4 episodes possibly. But so we're getting down to it, and I think this game is now, wide open, and I'm excited to see the finish of the season. But anyway, that'll do it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.